If there is one really problematic ability in the Naruto-verse, that will be Ninjutsu Absorption. This ability can cause all types of problems during a fight. It can make it less engaging because characters cannot use their jutsus against each other, and it just doesn't look very good in the page of the manga. It's not very engaging, it's not so cool to look at, and yet every single protagonist in Naruto/Boruto nowadays has this ability. And even the protagonist, if I'm being honest. But in order for us to understand how this began, because remember, this wasn't a thing back in the day, we have to go back, way back in the series. Most people kind of overlook this detail, but the first time we saw somebody absorbing chakra in the Naruto story was when Yoroi fought Sasuke during the preliminaries of the Chunin exams. A fight kind of forget because, let's be real, it's not that memorable, especially because of Rock Lee versus Gaara being in the same bracket of fights, and that Sasuke fight was pretty quick, but if you remember correctly, Yoroi, one of Orochimaru's henchmen, was able to absorb the opponent's chakra. Now, of course, this wasn't nearly as powerful as it would become later, but this was the precedent. This ability exists in the universe. Of course, Yoroi is not actually absorbing ninjutsu attacks, he's draining the chakra from the target into his own body, and he has to touch the target in order to do that. So there are limitations, very clear limitations for this ability. Still, it's a powerful jutsu, and a jutsu Orochimaru even remarks to be rare and something that's going to give Sasuke a lot of trouble, especially because of the condition he went into the fight. The second instance of this type of ability is when we see Kisame for the first time using the Samehada and draining Naruto's chakra cloak during that hotel exchange Jiraiya, Naruto, and Sasuke had with Kisame and Itachi. And Samehada just ate the chakra. So yeah, chakra is something that can be stolen/drained. The next time we see that is when Tayuya fights against Shikamaru, and those ghosts she uses with her summons can actually drain chakra. They're very weird looking monsters that are psychic in nature. They don't really have a material body, but they can eat chakra and drain your chakra by default. And this is a long range ability now, powerful by the way. We see Kishimaru is preparing the terrain for more and more powerful types of ninjutsu absorption, and well, we didn't even get to ninjutsu absorption yet, we just got to chakra absorption at first in part 1, but this ability exists. Fortunately, it is established as a rare type of ability. Not everyone is just draining somebody else's chakra, otherwise it would just become like things are right now, and when you add something powerful like that to a select few characters, it can make fights very engaging because, well, how are our protagonists going to deal with that? It's interesting. We then get to Naruto Shippuden, and this is the part where we get introduced to the Preta Path, which can actively drain ninjutsu attacks and completely negate them. We see this first in the fight against Jiraiya, where he absorbs that massive oil fire attack and then the Cho Odama Rasengan, and we're just like, wait, how is he doing that? Because that looks a little bit too OP. And there it is, the primal inception of this ability in the Naruto manga. This really helps Pain during his fights. I mean, he absorbs Rasen shurikens and all types of ninjutsu attacks during the Pain invasion and also against Jiraiya. Now, am I against this ability? No, I'm not. I think it's an interesting jutsu for Pain, which is supposed to be this godlike being in the Naruto verse, something that makes him even more unbeatable than he already is. Also, we see that the Preta Path has several weaknesses. For instance, he gets bodied several times in taijutsu. He's not very good at taijutsu. Kiba and his mom are pressing him enough for him to just run away. Kiba, it's not a very powerful fighter. And then another weakness is Sage Mode. He cannot control the Sage Mode energy that he drains into his body. Now, there was something kind of interesting because first, I just thought the Preta Path was negating the ninjutsu and that chakra was just kind of being deleted from existence when the Preta Path used his ability to drain a ninjutsu attack. But then in the Naruto fight, it was established that the chakra is actually entering the body of the Preta Path, which is actually pretty huge because if negating the attack is already powerful enough, if you drain the chakra and actually recover from it, well, this is absolutely insane. In theory, any user of the Preta Path should never run out of chakra after this, and this is a problem because later on, when Sasuke was fighting Naruto in the Valley of the End, why wasn't he absorbing Naruto's jutsus there and regaining his chakra? They were fighting hand to hand without much chakra for a long time. Why doesn't he do that sooner rather than later? Also, when Naruto aimed his his final Rasengan at Sasuke, you know, when they clashed and lost their arms, why didn't Sasuke just, you know, absorb Naruto's Rasengan with the Preta Path? Because we clearly see Nagato doing the exact same thing. Naruto aims a Rasengan at him, Nagato doesn't even move his hands. There's just an orb of Preta Path around Nagato's body, the Edo Tensei fight, that absorbs the Rasengan completely, and Naruto's absolutely screwed. He's only saved by Itachi that arrives in the nick of time. So you can start to see that this jutsu is actually kind of problematic. For the fights in the Naruto series, it creates a lot of problems. Now, you can excuse Sasuke's actions in the Valley of the End saying, well, he wasn't as experienced with the Rinnegan as he probably would become, so he just didn't think about using the Preta Path, even though he literally did use the Preta Path a couple of seconds before the final clash. Unless if you say that the Preta Path actually has a chakra cost to begin with, and then after you activate the jutsu, you start to regain the chakra that you drained from the attack. That could be a thing too, but it's never really explained, it's just left in the air. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We get introduced to Pain, Pain dies, and Pain wasn't as OP with the Preta Path because the Preta Path was just another Pain body that only had that power. We see this jutsu in full action again, as I mentioned before, when Nagato shows up as Edo Tensei in the war arc, and then Nagato being an extremely powerful combatant combined with the ability to drain chakra and ninjutsu. This makes for just an absolutely nightmare of a fighter to deal with. Naruto was literally going to die there if it wasn't for Itachi. He was very lucky in the scene, and also B was going to die. We see Nagato draining B's chakra, the tail B's chakra. He was in version 2, 8 tails, and Nagato drained everything in a couple of panels, regaining his former appearance because he was an old man when the fight started, meaning that, in theory, the Preta Path can also rejuvenate the user, which is really insane. So Rinnegan users are technically immortal if you think about it. And thankfully, it appears the Totsuka blade is immune to the Preta Path because Nagato just takes that and he doesn't even try to absorb it. And the problem with the Preta Path is that it literally has no limits. It is stated in the data books that the Preta Path is a bottomless pit that can absorb everything that's thrown against it. And the only way you can hope to damage the target by using ninjutsu against him when he has the Preta Path is if you use ninjutsu infused with Sage mode, because then there's a chance the target's going to not control the chakra very well and it's going to turn into stone or whatever. But then again, there are people like Madara Uchiha who laugh at the prospect of trying to control Senjutsu because it's just so easy. Speaking of which, Madara exists in the story as well, and he has a Rinnegan, which we find out when he shows up to fight the 4th Battalion. Turns out the Rinnegan is an evolution of the Sharingan, and Madara awakened it. And if Madara wasn't already OP enough, he can absorb ninjutsu. Now, it's more interesting when Madara does so because characters actually think about strategies to go around this problem. How are we going to deal damage against Madara? Because ninjutsu's not working. Do we do taijutsu or something else maybe? Sealing him? I don't know. But still, it can make the fights less engaging because Madara can just absorb a lot of stuff that's thrown against him. And even when he is blind and he doesn't have his Rinnegan, when he's revived via Rinne Tensei, he can still absorb ninjutsu via the Preta Path or maybe some other type of absorption. Because first, he absorbs Amaterasu when he's blind, without eyes, and people say the armor tanked the Amaterasu for him, but no, actually the armor fell off because of Amaterasu, but the Amaterasu was still surrounding Madara when the armor was on the ground. And also, if Madara couldn't absorb Amaterasu in that moment, and Sasuke saw that, he would just shoot Amaterasu again against Madara because he could literally spam that. He had an EMS, he didn't have to save his chakra or whatever, and actually hit Madara with it, killing him in the process, instead of attacking him in close range with his sword in that moment. And then Madara also absorbs Hashirama Sage mode with the Preta Path, enhancing his own Hashirama cells in that moment. Madara needed a way to get rid of ninjutsu attacks that were aimed against him, especially extremely powerful ones like Amaterasu, but it's interesting to see how the characters strategize around this problem. Especially the 5 Kage, they come up with a very interesting strategy to seal Madara when they all combine their powers that after Inoki destroys the 25 Susanoo clones with his particle style, the Mizukage and the Raikage fuse a water dragon with lightning that Madara absorbs, and then Gaara actually sends his sand through the dragon with those paper sealings that are actually going to seal Madara because he cannot absorb it, because he's already absorbing the water dragon, and also he got hit by Onoki's particle style because he cannot absorb things properly when his Susanoo is active. So there are some limitations for the Preta Path here for Madara as well. He cannot just absorb everything that's thrown against him, and sometimes with the Susanoo activated, for example, the jutsu is not going to be as effective, though it can still absorb things like particle style, which is insane because particle style is a KK Tota. It's an extremely powerful ability. He doesn't seem to be able to absorb truth-seeking orbs though, which is a KK Mora. It's just beyond ninjutsu, so it makes sense for it not to be absorbable. And so far we had 3 villains that abused this type of power. Well, actually 2. We had Pain and Nagato, which fight 2 different fights, but you can consider them as one person, and then Madara Uchiha. The problem is, there was also another user of the Rinnegan during the war arc, Obito, and he didn't use that ability whatsoever, and this is when the problems begin. Obito only used the Rinnegan to control the 6-path Jinchurikis. He didn't use the other base Rinnegan abilities, and Kakashi deduced that was because Obito didn't want to spend that much chakra. He didn't have mastery over the Rinnegan, and those abilities are very costly. Obito was not an Uzumaki like Nagato that has an nigh infinite chakra pool, so he had to be more conservative when using the Rinnegan itself. But there is an ability of the Rinnegan that doesn't really require chakra, and as a matter of fact, it regains your chakra, you know, the Preta Path? And granted, there was only one of those Jinchuriki paths that was able to use the Preta Path, but when they were defeated, Obito would gain access to that ability. Now, why wasn't Obito spamming that to regenerate his own chakra? I don't know. And also, remember when Naruto nailed him inside of the Kamui dimension and unmasked him for the first time? Obito could have used the Preta Path to absorb that Rasengan, couldn't he? He couldn't Kamui away because he was inside the Kamui dimension, but the Preta Path would be fair game. It's just that, of course, it's more impactful for the unmasking be done via a Rasengan than just a punch or something like that. And also, Kishimoto didn't want to make Obito too OP, having Kamui and all those Rinnegan abilities, but this is a problem. If you have an ability that would be very useful in a given time and the character doesn't use it because apparently the author forgot about it, it's a problem in the writing. You could have established that the Preta Path actually takes a lot of chakra to activate, and it only regains it afterwards when you drain the chakra of a certain jutsu, but usually the exchange is not favorable for the user, meaning that you would spend more chakra than regain. This would make the jutsu much more balanced, but this is never really done, so we have these issues with fights, especially involving Obito when he has the Rinnegan. And then when we get introduced to the 10 Tails Jinchurikis, things get a little bit silly. Now, they don't literally absorb ninjutsu, but they might as well because they can negate ninjutsu. Jubito, after he stabilizes, is completely immune to all types of ninjutsu. The powerful Rasen Shuriken Amaterasu combination doesn't work on him at all, and he can only be touched by taijutsu or nature energy, which is a weakness in the sense that you can actually touch him, but it's not as though it's Obito's kryptonite in that state, meaning that this is where things begin to get a little bit silly. All of a sudden, ninjutsu is not very useful anymore, and you need Sage Mode to be effective. And there are no limitations for this immunity to ninjutsu here, unlike the Preta Path. Even though there were few weaknesses for the Preta Path, there were still weaknesses for the jutsu. Here, you're just immune to everything except Sage Mode. Jubidara is the exact same thing, so much so that the only person that's kinda capable of fighting him before Naruto and Sasuke get their amps is 8 Gates Guy, which, don't get me wrong, that's an amazing fight, and I wouldn't not have it for anything, but you can see that things are getting a little bit silly. But up until this point, I wasn't mad with this new aspect of the series. Jubito and Jubidara are supposed to feel like gods, and the Preta Path for the Rinnegan users, it's also supposed to feel like this otherworldly amp. After all, the Rinnegan is the eye of a quote-unquote god, and the characters that had it were extremely powerful. This ability actually made some sense in the lore, and for the most part, it was interesting to see how characters got around it. Also, when Naruto and Sasuke get the powers from Hagoromo, they are able to touch Madara just fine with their ninjutsu. So I was pretty good with that. It's fine. These are supposed to be the godly beings of the universe. I actually like that aspect of the story. Some people don't like that the characters got so powerful, but I enjoy it. I like stories that begin with weak characters in retrospect, and then they ascend to almost godhood. I find that fascinating. But then this is ruined, like everything else is in the Naruto series, with the arrival of Kaguya and the Otsutsuki concept. Now, unlike Madara, that could be touched by Sasuke and Naruto's ninjutsu, Kaguya was a different story. Sometimes she could and sometimes she couldn't. It's very selective, shall we say. For example, when Sasuke comes from above in the magma dimension and nails her with a Susanoo, the Susanoo explodes. Like, why did she negate the Susanoo so damn hard? I don't understand. And then afterwards, Kakashi is using his Susanoo just fine against her. And even though Naruto and Sasuke have the abilities of the Sage of Six Paths, sometimes they are unable to do anything against her. But even though Kage is the worst character ever created because of what she meant for the Naruto series, she's by no means the worst offender in terms of I just absorbed ninjutsu thing, because Boruto is much worse. But before we go to Boruto, we have to take a look again at Naruto versus Sasuke in the Valley of Climactic Battle. Sasuke only uses the Preta Path once in that fight. Now maybe it's because he's afraid of absorbing too much sage energy when they are fighting with the big avatars, and maybe it's unfeasible to do that with the Susanoo, which was established before with Madara saying, okay, the Susanoo prevented me from using the Preta Path correctly, but then again, this ability does not require chakra to be used, as far as we can tell. Remember when they were just punching each other to no end without chakra, quote unquote? Why didn't Sasuke, whenever he managed to touch Naruto, which, well, he did several times during that exchange with no chakra, he could have just used the Preta Path and absorbed Naruto again and again. If Naruto gets a sliver of chakra back, Sasuke just absorbs it. I mean, he seemed to be very good at absorbing chakra from the 9-tailed beast he imprisoned in the Chibaku Tenseis, even with his Susanoo. So the excuse that Sasuke wasn't very proficient at the Preta Path here doesn't really work, does it? Now, Kishimoto tries to say Naruto was holding back in the fight, but it was actually Sasuke because he wasn't using the Rinnegan to its fullest potential at all. And this is an inherent problem of the Preta Path. It can make the fights unengaging because characters just forget they have it and don't use it. But at least Naruto Sasuke was a good fight. It was emotional, which is definitely the most important thing. It was also very well drawn. The panels were great. It was well animated. A bit rushed? Yes, it was a bit rushed, but still, it was a good fight. So I can overlook the problem of the Preta Path here. But when we get to Boruto, then it turns into just the worst thing you could possibly imagine. The first main antagonist is Momoshiki, and his ability is literally to eat chakra and attacks anything and throw it back against the target double power. Wow, never seen that before. It makes the fights absolutely unengaging. The jutsus don't work on the guy, which is frustrating. Every single thing they try is like, I'm just going to eat that. Even Kaguya wasn't that bad. Some jutsus were working against her, but sure, you can say that characters finding a way to work around that problem is interesting, and it can be interesting, even though the manga fight was absolutely horrible. The Boruto anime actually had the best animated episode in the entire Naruto franchise for the Naruto and Sasuke vs Momoshiki fight, so at least there's that. But then things start to get worse and worse. We have Delta, and her ability, guess what? She could absorb jutsus and ninjutsu with her eyes. Again, wow guys, that's very creative. At least she had a limitation because she couldn't take everything Naruto threw against her. Like, Naruto's strategy there was just like, I'm gonna pump her so full of chakra, she's gonna burst. Okay, this didn't sound very good, but anyways, another villain whose main shtick was to just negate jutsu and then engage in taijutsu with the opponent. And guys, the Boruto taijutsu fights in the manga, they are just so bad, unengaging. There's always those speed lines behind the characters. They always use the same choreography, and the panels are so flat and boring. It's trash. Now, of course, they do that in Boruto because they don't want to explode a continent for every fight, because that's kind of what the characters should be doing by that point in the story. But no, they're just like punching each other, not very hard, and the fights are lackluster and unengaging because of it. Characters cannot use jutsu. And then we get Jigen, who has karma, and now karma is just like the Preta Path. It can absorb ninjutsu. Wow, great job, guys. Thought about another very creative jutsu here for the villains. At least in Naruto, the villains who had ninjutsu absorption capabilities also had other things going for them, like ninjutsu. Jigen can shrink things arms and unshrink them a little bit, and that's it for the character. He also punches through Sasuke, so that scene's cringe. But yeah, karma can absorb chakra. Very creative, guys. I love when Amaterasu is absolutely useless in every single fight, because we have the coolest ability ever created in a shonen series. You know, these dark flames that look awesome in every panel, and it's just the most worthless jutsu here. And Naruto, he doesn't even use the Rasen Shuriken anymore. He doesn't use the Rasen Shuriken once in the Boruto manga. Like, why? Or even the Bijudama, for that matter. He just doesn't use his jutsu arsenal, which isn't very big anyways, but could have used more. They do establish a weakness for Jigen's karma absorption and the karma absorption in general, and that is they cannot absorb natural elements. So great value Jiraiya summons fire from a mountain of fire and whatever, and then he kills Jigen, because we've never seen characters surviving basic fire attacks before. Like, Jigen's durability there, it's lower than Kid Naruto, but anyways, why don't you do more interesting stuff with it? I can think about a very nice jutsu that has a natural element and that Sasuke only used once in the manga. You know, Kirin could have been a very interesting thing for you to do here. No, we just used great value Jiraiya, this character nobody cares about. We're just using this design, copying Jiraiya's design because we are trying to nostalgia bait you guys. But anyways, we then get Isshiki, and he doesn't absorb ninjutsu, but what he does is much worse. You know, he can shrink everything that you throw against him. It's even worse than ninjutsu absorption, because now he can shrink weapons and everything. He cannot shrink living things, and that's the limitation of the jutsu. And all of a sudden now, you have to just punch the guy. The Brian mode versus Isshiki fight is so absolutely boring. It's just a fist fight. I don't know why people love it so much. Now, I expected that when Naruto went Brian God mode, he would be throwing all sorts of nice and cool looking jutsus against Isshiki, but no, he's just fighting him a fist fight again. And it's bad because it's the Boruto manga, and the fist fights in the Boruto manga are absolute trash all around. And Isshiki gets fooled by a shadow clone, dies, whatever. But now, our main antagonist is Kawaki, and he also has karma. And also, Boruto has karma, so they can absorb ninjutsu. Meaning that the two main characters of the series now, they can absorb anything that is thrown against them. Very cool, huh? And taijutsu is the way, apparently, because the Boruto manga is so good at drawing taijutsu fights. You get the problem here? Every single major villain is using the same exact ability with a few tweaks. It's just that now, oh, he can shrink something instead of absorbing it. Oh, actually, he can absorb it through karma, not through the eyes. In Naruto, this ability was used sparingly for the most part. And even when characters were kind of spamming this ability, there were interesting ways to go around it, and also other jutsus that would work. But in Boruto, it's just ninjutsu is kind of worthless. And ninjutsu was the coolest part about Naruto fights, at least aesthetically. The Preta Path caused some problems for the narrative, but at least Naruto vs Sasuke in the Valley of the End was an engaging, good-looking, and emotional fight. You cannot say the same about Momoshiki versus Naruto and Sasuke, Isshiki versus Naruto and Sasuke, Jigen versus Naruto and Sasuke, Delta versus Naruto. They are all the same fight. It's the same. The characters try to use the ninjutsu doesn't work. They go for taijutsu, they get beaten, they come back somehow and manage to beat the guy back, or they lose sometimes. And now Boruto and Kawaki have the exact same abilities. Oh, and Kawaki also has a shrinking ability, Sakuna Hikona. He has the exact same abilities as Isshiki had because he has the same karma seal. It's a mess. And now he can negate every single attack as long as he has chakra. The lesson is that you should diversify the arsenal of your villains, and of course your heroes too. Like, can you imagine in part 1 Naruto if every villain had the exact same ability, just a little bit different from the other? Haku can absorb ninjutsu through his eyes, Zabuza can absorb ninjutsu through his sword, Orochimaru can absorb ninjutsu through his snakes, Itachi can absorb ninjutsu through his eyes. Like, how engaging would that be in terms of fighting? Now, we're not even talking about the plot or anything, we're just talking about this particular aspect of the Naruto series now. And then if every character that can use this ability decides not to, then we have a problem too, because it wouldn't make sense within the story. Just like when Obito doesn't use the Preta Path, we're just like, well, hold on, Obito, what are you doing, man? You should have used the Preta Path. At least the Boruto series is very consistent with making Isshiki and now Kawaki shrinking everything that comes to their sight, which, you know, it's supposed to make sense in the story, but it makes the fight so boring and dull. But anyway, subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already, and like this video to help me out with the YouTube algorithm. Watch this other video right here for more entertaining Naruto content, and thank you so much for watching.